This is Dan Abbott. I am making this video for Module 11 in the AEDD 260 class in CAD Management at Southern Maine Community College. This module has to do with managing existing drawings that have, well, you'll see in just a second. So if we go to the content area on Brightspace, in the content area on Brightspace, we're talking about Module 11, and there are three kinds of problems we're going to be dealing with. One of them is managing a drawing that is a mess, which you might get from elsewhere, and it's a real drawing, by the way. Extracting data from an existing drawing, which is to say extracting attribute data primarily, although you can extract other kinds of data as well. And then managing external references in a drawing. So if we go to the assignments category, under assignments, you have three separate assignments that are leading up to our final capstone project. So we'll go to the first one, which is the problem drawing. There's two files that you can download. One of them is a file that is the problem drawing itself, and the other is the PDF file that tells you what to do. So if we open that PDF file, what I want you to do is to go down through and make sure you address each of these items for this drawing. So you're going to open this drawing called Fix This Drawing, review it, identify the problem that it has, and make a list of the things that would have to be changed. You don't have to change everything. You are going to have to make some changes, but you don't have to completely fix this drawing, and you'll see why as soon as I open it. One of the things about this drawing is that things like color, line type, and line weight are not set to by layer. They're changed individually. That can be a real problem when you start managing drawings. But I want you to use some of the layer tools, some of the specialized layer tools. And the one that's most significant here is a layer walk tool. Lay walk is what it's called. And I want you to go through and figure out what's on all these various layers and to do some layer management, to get rid of layers that are not necessary, to get rid of layers that aren't being used for anything. And then I want you to set up the drawing with some layouts that represent clearly something about this drawing. So we're going to put this aside, and now let's go open the drawing. So we can open the drawing directly, and I think what I'll do though is save it. I'm going to save this drawing, and the reason I'm going to save this drawing, and I'll put it in my documents folder. You can put it wherever you want. I'm doing that because I want to use AutoCAD 2022, which is what I have right now. I'll open that file in your documents, and it is called Fix This Drawing. Now we open it. Now you'll see why this is a drawing that needs to be fixed. This is, by the way, an actual drawing sent to me by a graduate who was working for a company, and one of the first things he had to do was to clean up this drawing. Now you notice there is no layout in this drawing at all. It is all model space, and as you can see, it's quite a mess. A couple things you might want to do about any drawing that you get like this when you first start is do a purge and just get rid of stuff that you don't need. And in this particular case, purgeable items, and there are some non-purgeable items. This is a new and more recent releases of AutoCAD that you can go and identify those. But I'm going to pick all items, and I'm going to come over here and say purge nested items as well. I'm going to eliminate confirm each to be purged, and I'm going to also purge any zero length geometry. That's a line that has a start point and an end point that's the same point. Any empty text objects, because they're still seen as objects even if you create a text object and don't type anything in. Orphaned data that doesn't have any meaning because it was attached to something else that's now gone. So I'm now going to do a purge all, go through, close, and now I've gotten rid of some things. I'm not even sure what I got rid of, but I've gotten rid of some things. Might not also be a bad idea to do an overkill at some point. And by the way, keep the original when you do anything with a drawing like this. Don't replace it with what you're doing. Put it someplace so you can go back to it in case something goes wrong. Overkill, all, that's a what's called an express tool command. And you can go through and ignore some things or not ignore some things. And I'm going to do something that involves all of the overkill options at once. It used to be that you had to do them one at a time, but it's gotten much better. Pick that. It's going to take a little bit, and it did delete 1,197 duplicates, 4,397 overlapping objects or segments were deleted. In fact, let's take a look here. Yeah, and there's 16,000 items in here. It says one's not in current space. That just means it's probably the viewport in the layout. And then a hatch boundary associativity was removed. So there were a lot of things that just happened. Still a mess. So how do you sort through something like this? At one time that would have been fairly difficult, but there are some tools that make that fairly easy now. One thing I'm going to do is go and see how many layers are there in this drawing. You can see there are a lot of layers in this drawing. Now those layer names are not particularly descriptive. They're abbreviations. You can probably kind of guess what they are. But the worst part about AutoCAD at one time was a drawing like this. If you wanted to find out what was on each layer, you'd have to freeze all the layers except the current layer and go through them one at a time, which at the time didn't seem like a big burden. What we have now is a tool, in fact a number of layer tools. Let me just open up my ribbon here, which I keep closed up. Oop, I went too far. All right, if you look under the layer tools, there's a whole grouping of tools right here, and then if you drop down, there's a few others as well. If you just hover over each one of them, you can see that you can turn off the layer by selecting an object on that layer. You can isolate a layer by selecting an object on that layer, and everything else goes away. You can then unisolate it. You can freeze a layer by selecting an object. You can lock a layer by selecting an object. You can pick an object and make it current, which are all nice things. Come down here, there's some other tools for turning layers on and off. And then match layer, where you take something and say match the layer of one item to another item. What we're going to have to do is go down below, and I'm looking for the icon that has a stack of papers and a couple little feet. But just to see what the other ones are, you can go back to a previous layer state. Layer P is the name of the command for that, and you can incorporate that into a Lisp program, and in some cases that's very helpful when you change layers, change a layer state for some purpose in a Lisp program, and when you're done you want to go back to what was there before. Then you have change to the current layer, and it tells you when you hover over these things. Of course, if you wait a little bit, it opens up a little more and gives you information about what that thing does. Anyway, it changes a layer's property of selected objects to whatever the current layer is, whatever you have set for the current layer. But this is the one right here that I'm interested in. And what that allows you to do is to look at layers selectively by walking through. And from my mind, the easiest way to use that, but you have a couple tools in here too. You can select objects and see what else is on the layer. If you go to this filter, you can create a filter or use a layer filter. In this case, I haven't got one yet, so I'm just going to start by going to layer 0. And you notice there's only one thing on layer 0, and it's this item down here. The one thing about this that I find would be really helpful that you can't do, you can't zoom in on that while you're in this, but you can certainly quickly do this. Just going to put this off to one side. I'm just going to go down through, and you can see, well, a little hard to tell because I've got my gray background, but there's some blue lines there. Now you can see what's on that layer. By walking down through these layers, and each one of them has something. There's a full section elevation that was hidden in there. There's another full section elevation. So you can go down through and find things on these various layers. Now I've removed information about the company that was involved with this. And I see a reference over here. Maybe I need to remove as well, but no, that's not a company here. Anyway, def points, of course, is on any time you put dimensions in. So you can walk down through here, and as you can see, it's a very nice way to find out what is going on. And once you've identified those layers, now you can go and make layer states, and those layer states can help you to manage your layers. You can also figure out, you need to combine a group of things from one layer onto another. Now, even though we did a purge and got rid of, at least theoretically, things that are not necessary, it appears that there are a number of layers that have nothing on them at all. So I'm going to go find one of those layers and just go to a drop down. And so, for instance, if I go to this layer right here and I set it current, I can now freeze all but the current layer. I can do that from a tool up here, but I'm just going to show you another way to do it that you can then incorporate into a Lisp program. If I type LA freeze asterisk for everything, it freezes everything except the current layer. Now if I do a double click in the middle wheel or a zoom extents, I can find whatever is on there, and you'll notice they have separate layers for simply items that appear in a title block. So that's EL4. That's EL404, which is apparently a reference to a page that has electrical information on it. Now layer per, layer P goes back to the previous layer state. Now it does that. I zoomed in here. This is where that is. But if I double click now, it goes back and you can see you've got the whole thing here. Now I want to take a look at layer states. So we've got a layer property manager here. And in layer property manager, there are some filter tools. Let me open up that a little bit more. So we got the names here, and then each of these, if I just double click here, I can open those up a little more quickly. I'm just going between the columns, and then double clicking just to open them up far enough so I can read everything that's in them. And these are all the categories that you have some control over with layers. So now those are all the layer names, and right now they're just listed, actually listed in reverse alphabetical order right now. So do this one. And that's the status. So if we look over here, all the layers are being listed. You can come down here and say, give me a listing of all the used layers. You can also create a group filter. Now the group filter in this case has nothing in it. I actually probably had to add that one. That was not, well, no, it's in the drawing that I just opened. So there is a group filter. What you can do with a group filter is this. You can manually drag layers from the list of all layers, or if you prefer, all used layers. You can just grab things from that list and put them over into the group filter. And once you've done that, you can use that group filter to turn layers on and off in the listing of the layers. It doesn't actually turn them on and off. It just turns on the listing. Now I can also go up here and I can create a layer filter. So we notice there's a lot of layers beginning with RF, and there's a number of other layers beginning with PL, or even maybe FD. So if we want to make a layer filter, we come over here, create a layer filter. I'm going to create one called FD. And I'm just going to go down in the name category. And I'm going to type FD. And what automatically happens is an asterisk gets in there. And that then limits only the layers beginning with FD. So now my list of layers are only the layers beginning with FD. Again, it doesn't change anything over here. But it's easy for me to make that change by saying, all right, I want only these showing because I want to see what's going on. Now I come down here, invert my filter. That just means we're going to get all the layers that don't begin with FD. And now, if I just highlight everything here, all those layers, and then say freeze all those layers, yeah, I have a current layer here, and I can't freeze the current layer, which I knew because I'd tried it before. So what I need to do is to change, there it is right there, EL1. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back to non-inverting layers, and I'm going to make one of those layers my current layer. Then I go back to the layer inverted filter, and I'll find that layer that I couldn't freeze before, which is right there. And now I'll freeze it. Now, if you take a look out here, what I've just done is I've isolated all the layers beginning with those characters, and everything else has been frozen. Well, what if I want to create layer states that allow me to manage this drawing? Then I would go back up here. This is not a filter. The filter is just a filter on the list now. What I want over here is a layer state manager. And I'm going to say I'm going to make a new layer state, and that new layer state is going to be called FD, whatever that stands for. And then I put a description here of whatever that stands for, and then pick OK. Now, once I've got that, and that's going to create a layer state based on the current state of layers, frozen, unfrozen, etc. So I'll close this out. Now, if I come back here and look at all used layers and get rid of my inversion, there's everything right there. That state looks like this, but I can go back to layer states, and if I had a different layer state, I could select that. So I'll make another layer state here. And I'll make another layer state by thawing out all unused layers. I have to highlight them all and then pick the same thing. It's such a long list. It's kind of astonishing that this was produced and that it kept getting added onto and added onto. All right, now all those layers are thought out, and you can see that over on the right-hand side. What that allows me to do now is to go back and create another layer group. And I would know based on my layer walk what layer group I might want to make. Excuse me. Let's go back so lay walk is what that command is called. So I'm going to go back down through, and it looks to me like the CF layers, that might be worthwhile. So let's maybe make a layer group out of CF layers. So I'll go over here, I'll filter out every layer beginning with CF and ending in anything. When I click into name, by the way, you can also filter based on their current state. But in this case, the main thing is to organize the layers. So I'll type CF, an asterisk comes out afterward. I'll do this, and now only the layers starting with CF are listed. Doesn't change their state, that's just their listing. Once again, I'll make one of them current. I'll go and invert my filter. When I've inverted the filter, usually start at the bottom and go up. I just kind of pick that one, scroll all the way up to the top, and then I'm going to say let's freeze all those layers right there, and then I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to make another layer state. So there'll be a new layer state. It's going to be called CF, and again, whatever the description is on that, come back over here, close it out. Now I just come back out here, and you can see I'm now managing this drawing so that there's some logic to the layering. Now it's not complete logic. Now if you look at the requirements, I want you to make layer states, not for everything necessarily, but enough layer states and layer filters so that you can manage this drawing. And then when you're done, there's some layers that just don't have much value you can get rid of. So you're going to do all the things listed here. And when you're all done, I want you to do a couple other things. I want you to create a layout, and I want you to put in that layout, where were we at? Create enough for 4 different layouts that properly display useful elements of the drawing. In other words, find something about this drawing that could logically be laid out in 4 different layouts. Use your template files for architectural that you created in AEDD 160, and then set up these layouts with title blocks, and then fill those title blocks in. Make sure you have right scales, all that. Just do everything you would have to do on a drawing. Now, okay, the Wblock command. There's a kitchen plan in here someplace. I don't know where it is. You don't know where it is. So I'm going to now change my layer state by thawing asterisk everything. So I tend to go back and forth with layer states and command line. And by the way, don't forget you have some Lisp here. You could write Lisp programs to do things like that. You could write your own command that you could just issue at the command prompt, and whatever that is, when you're done with it, you just type that command and you can get it. So for instance, I could say I'm going to define a new function called let's just call LT for layer thaw. I don't think that's been used for anything. Let's call it LThaw. And all it would have to do is issue the command layer, and then thaw, and then asterisk. And as long as we're here, we could also do one that does the same thing, only freezes them. So I'm going to copy that, bring it down, paste it. Now I'll call this freeze. So in some ways, we're duplicating some of those buttons there. And that's going to freeze all but the current layer, of course. So if I load these two now, I've got these 2 commands. So if I say freeze, yeah, it's current layer. Now that goes away like that. If then I say thaw, it does that. Now the reason I have to hit the enter key is because I forgot to do something in my Lisp program. Sorry about my typing. And the thing I forgot to do in my Lisp program is this. Go back to the VLisp. The thing I forgot to do in my Lisp program is to get out of the layer command when I was done making a change. So I'm going to put that enter in here instead with the double quotes. Load this one more time. And now freeze, bang. Thaw, bang. This goes back and forth. Now I'm doing this because I also want to then go to Layer Walk. And I want to do Layer Walk because I want to find that kitchen that I need to make a Wblock thing out of. So I'm just going to walk down through here until I see something that looks like a kitchen. And since I said there's a kitchen in here, I'm assuming that there is. Although now that there it is right there. There's a kitchen. So FD1 is the layer name. And I actually have an FD. That was really well planned. I actually didn't even notice. But I do have an FD filter on here. So I can go over here to Layers and just say, let's go and reinstate my FD filter by selecting it, restore, come back out. Now I've got this. Now the job here is to create a drawing out of this, an independent drawing using Wblock. And this is just to remind you that you have a save command called Wblock, completely misnamed, but it allows you to select objects. And if I do base point, you can even pick the base point. So if you want to bring that kitchen in and have it used in some other place, you might want to make that your base point, for instance. Then we're going to select our objects. And you might want the dimensions, maybe not. Let's just say you don't. And I'm just going to grab all that stuff. Now, by the way, another reminder. Let's go select objects again. I'm now going to use a window poly instead of a window. And when you do a window poly, it allows you to go over and be selective about how you pick this. You don't need a rectangle anymore. I'm just creating a polygon. So let's just say I want to do only those items right there. Now, those are the items I've selected. I go back over here. I'm going to give this a name. By default, it's going to be put in your user folder. I'm going to put this in my documents folder, and I will call this, it's in documents. I'll call this kitchen. Pick OK. Now it's done. Now I can open that up as a separate drawing, and as a separate drawing, it's going to show up right there. So this is really just to remind you that you can create drawings out of existing drawings. Now I didn't include the creation of any other drawings from this one, but if you worked for me and that was my mess of a drawing, I would have you go and create multiple drawing files by pulling data out, and the Wblock command would be your best bet. Now we'll look at the other items on that list and just see. Okay, this one I'm not going to give you any instruction on at all. I'm just telling you that there's something called a DWS file, and I want you to find out what it is, do a little research. It's not a drawing file, although, well, it's actually identical to a drawing file except for the extension, but there's a reason for it. I want you to create one, and then I want you to use it for what it's designed for. And then upload your file, and then just write a little summary of all the changes that you made. Again, you don't have to completely fix this drawing. Just do what it says in this document. So the other two drawings that you are going to deal with involve, go take a look at them. All right, so back to manage assignments. This will look a little different to you, of course, because I'm logged in as an instructor. Okay, attribute extraction. We'll take a look at that. Now, the attribute extraction problem also involves the drawing that I'm giving you. It gives you the instructions right here on what you're going to do. And those instructions are to copy the drawing and then open it. It tells you to go and get it, but I think I actually gave it to you. Didn't I? I did. Okay, so the drawing is here. The instructions are here. No, they aren't. The instructions are buried up here. This is a paper that I wrote about annotative objects, because you need to understand something about annotative objects to do this. And the data linking paper is something someone else wrote that is a much more extensive exploration of how to link Excel spreadsheets to AutoCAD. And it's possible to have Excel spreadsheets driving the geometry in AutoCAD. Something I kind of wish I covered in this class, but we can't do everything, I guess is what I'm saying. So with the Tanny drawing, what I'm going to do is take and save that once again, which is what I want you to do. And I'll save that once again in Documents. So you're going to use that drawing as opposed to creating one. Again, this is a document that I wrote to supplement your textbook. So you should keep it anyway, because annotative objects didn't exist. You notice this was done I wrote this in 2008 and delivered it at Autodesk University. I wrote the book in 2006. So annotative objects were on the horizon, but I wasn't given permission to discuss them in that book because they hadn't actually been released yet. So this is the technical paper that I presented, and there's also a PowerPoint on our Google Drive as well. Now we have the Tanny drawing. I can go and get this. And then as far as reading this goes, I'm telling you that I want you to go in and edit several blocks. Not all the blocks in there, just those 5 blocks right there. And those blocks, that's how many insertions of each one of those there are. And I want you to add invisible, non-locked, annotative attributes using an acceptable text style and an acceptable plotted height. And then I want you to add those attributes to each one of those block definitions. And then go through the process of making it work. This thing in red right here, optional. The reason it's optional is because it involves an extraction process that doesn't rely on data extract, which is a command in AutoCAD that uses a dialog box. Prior to that, if you wanted to extract attribute data, you had to do it by writing essentially a program, text file that described what you wanted to pull out. You don't need to do that anymore. But why am I making it an option? Because one of the things I did on the capstone type project that updates hundreds of drawings, one of the things I did for a company one time was wrote a series of commands that involved a batch file, a script file, and a lisp routine that would open every drawing in the company automatically and then extract from those drawings all the attribute data in the title blocks and then write that data to a text file and then do the next one and append it. So when they were done, they had an entire document that listed the values assigned to every single attribute in every title block in every drawing that they had, because they wanted to be able to have something to refer to without having to open all these drawings one at a time. So in the event that down the road you get a job and go, man, I'd love to be able to just take a look at all the data that we have in all our title blocks so I could find this drawing that I'm looking for or figure something out, you can then, I hope, remember that there's a way to do that, and the way to do that involves this. So you don't have to do that for this assignment. It's described in detail in the book, your textbook, and it is really useful when you're doing something that involves Lisp programming where you can't deal with dialog boxes. And anyway, some of this stuff, all these attributes have to be annotative. You have to add annotative scale to it. And then it says the data linking paper just for your information. So now I'm going to go back to AutoCAD 2022, which, by the way, you've probably noticed doesn't look much different from AutoCAD 2020, actually, or even before that. So I'm going to open this up. We'll go down and get the Tanny drawing, which is right here. The Tanny drawing is it's a landscaping drawing, and it's got a bunch of blocks in it. I have actually no idea where it came from. I don't remember. But it does have all these blocks in it. So if you take a look at the description of what you have to do, oh, I don't need to open that. Instead, I go back here. Sorry. What you have to do is find these blocks and do something. So I'm just going to take shrub 2 as my block definition. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to the block editor, and I'm going to find shrub 2 listed here. I'm going to say let's edit that block. So this is shrub 2 right here, and I need to add attributes. To add attributes to a block, it's also a little bit of a review. Attribute definition is right up here in the block editor. You can also type at definition is what it stands for. And that's what you get when you pick this. So now, I told you I wanted you to make it, I don't remember exactly, but if it says invisible, you're going to do that. Lock position, I would get rid of that actually. These other things I'd leave alone. And I told you that, just do one of them. The position of the tree using a field. Okay, position of the tree using a field for the value and the cost of the tree with a default of $100. So we're going to have a default in there. So I'm going to put 2 attributes in here. And the attributes that I'm going to put in are going to be position. And that position is going to be an X, Y, and Z position. So what I do in attributes is I always have the prompt be the same. In fact, the easiest way to do that, I make a tag, and the tag name, no spaces, I make that, copy it down here, put a question mark, and that becomes my prompt. Now for default, instead of typing something here, I'm going to go to the button right here that deals with fields. And what I want to do is insert a field in that location. And a field is something that queries the drawing, uses data in the drawing, and then places it in that location. So there are a number of fields that you can use in a title block. You know, there's a date field. Unfortunately, the date field is a current date, so it's not all that useful. But there are a lot of things you can have placed automatically. For blocks, there's a group of things that fall under block placeholder. When you go to block placeholder and take a look at the options that you have, position is one of the options. Then you get to decide what units to use. They can be decimal units, they can be the current units. I'm going to have you do the current units. And if the current units are architectural, the position is going to be located from 0, 0. And this is a landscape drawing now. And frequently landscape drawings, or at least civil engineering drawings, are placed in a specific spot on Earth where that X and Y position would be helpful. We don't really care about the Z position because we don't have contours or elevations. I'm going to say current units, X and Y, and then additional formatting. You can go in here if you want and put a prefix in front of it. So if you wanted to say location here, for instance, you could do that. You can deal with zero suppression if you want, if you're doing architectural units. You probably want to, well, you probably don't want to suppress, well, maybe you do. Maybe you want to suppress 0 inches because it's a landscape drawing. Doesn't matter. I don't care what you do here as long as you do something. Now when we say OK, it gets placed in as a default right here. Now we're going to place this thing. Now I want this to be annotative, which means I want it to scale with the drawing, and the plotted size I want it to be for the text is going to be 1/8 of an inch. And I also want it to be based on, oh, it's already there. I want it to be based on the Romanesque style. I didn't mean to put that in there. I wanted you to do it, but okay, that's fine. And I pick OK, and I'm going to specify on screen where to put it. So I'll say I want to put it right there. Now it looks really, really tiny there, but it's annotative, so it's not going to be really, really tiny when we use it in the drawing. So I will add one more attribute here. And the other attribute that I'm going to add is going to be cost. So I'll say cost question mark, and I told you to make the default $100. Not a good idea to put a $sign in here, because if you pull this data out, you're going to want to be able to deal with it mathematically. So you can just do it with a decimal point like that, and we can just have it pop in below the previous definition. Yeah, but don't forget, I still want it annotative. All right, so now we got 2 of these little things in here like that. Now I'm just going to close the block editor. And yes, I want to change the save. Now I'm not sure exactly where shrub appears in here, but it does say it appears a number of times. Just kind of curious, so I'm going to go to my properties, and I could have done this directly, but I'm going to go to quick properties. I'm going to say go ahead and my block references, get my block references that correspond to the name, shrub2, just curious where they all are, and pick them. There they are. So all of them are right here. So that's just a way to find out where they are, so we can kind of zoom in and take a look at them. Now, right now, none of these has an attribute assigned to it. And they don't have an attribute assigned because they were inserted prior to my editing that block. So I have to run a command called @sync. And I'm just going to say, let's @sync. Well, we can @sync everything. We can say, let's @sync by name. So we can say, let's @sync shrub2. And now it says @sync is complete. Now these things have, all these shrubs, believe it or not, have these attributes associated with it. Now why don't we see them? Because they're really, really tiny. Double click on it and you'll see something appears over here. They show up, we can make changes to them, but it is so tiny we can't read it. Now it also, by the way, is oriented with the orientation of the block itself. We'll leave it, but that's okay. You can do that for now. Now, how do I make that match? Well, right now, the annotative scale assigned is 1:1. If I were going to set this up with a layout, which you have to do, what would I need for a scale to get that to fit on a sheet of paper? Well, whatever scale you think you need, go ahead and do it. If I do 1:100, Not even close, so we need something more like 1 to 1,000. All right, come over here, go to custom scales. You're going to make yourself a scale. So we'll have a 1 inch equals, I'm assuming this was drawn in feet, but I don't know if that's true or not. No, I'm just going to say 1 to 1,000. And down here for my units, 1 to 1,000, pick OK, pick OK. Now you don't have to do 1 to 1,000, do whatever you want, but I'm doing this because I think, yeah, that's going to fit on here. So 1 to 1,000 fits on here. Knowing that, I'm going to go back over here to Model Space, and in Model Space I'm going to set the annotative scale to 1 to 1,000, the one I just created. Now it still doesn't do anything until I pick it, right-click, and say Annotative Object Scale, Add Current Scale. And even though the block itself is not annotative, once I've done that, it adds that in. Yeah, here's the problem, and we'll solve that one as well. This is, see what that says. Yeah, so this drawing was done in architectural units. 1 to 1,000 was just much too big for the scale that I want. It just comes in way too big on here. So I simply picked something that isn't going to work. I'm going to go back to 1 to 100 on this. And again, I'll come down and I'll take that block, right-click, Annotative Object Scale, Add Current Scale. So now you see it's a little bit more readable. Unfortunately, though, they're on top of each other. So that's a question of going back into Block Editor. And while you're in the Block Editor, separating those two so that they're in two different locations. So we'll put position right down here. And that might be enough. Put this up here. Close Block Editor. Save the changes. Once again, we have to @sync. And we'll just do an @sync all on this one. I had to use a program called @sync all in order to get it to do this. So what I need to do is to select a block right now, and I'll select that block right there. We'll sync it, and now those dimensions come in. And by the way, if you look at @display right now, it's set to on. If I set it to normal, those disappear because I made them invisible. So now I'm going to go back and turn them on, and it looks like that. Now again, the orientation here I'm not concerned about. I just want to be able to pull the data out of here. So it doesn't even matter that you can read it. But in the event that you want to be able to turn these all on and read them, there you go. Now here's the next step. When you want to add annotative scales to multiple non-annotative blocks that have annotative attributes inside that block, you've got a problem, because normally what you have to do is pick one, right-click, add annotative scale, and then it works. This is what we did before. However, if you pick more than one, like you do that, for instance, so I pick more than one, I right-click, I don't get that option. If I go to Properties and I pick all the blocks under Properties that have the name shrub, annotative doesn't appear over here because the blocks themselves are not annotative. So you've got a couple of possibilities. One of them is to use the Object Scale command, and then you can select things individually. So I could pick those two things right there, and then I do this and say let's add whatever object scale is going to work on this, and now they show up. Let me undo that. So what I want to be able to do is to select them all using QSelect, but here's the problem. Object Scale, a little bit odd. Object Scale asks for annotative objects, but if I try to select them using QSelect, it tells me that's an invalid, even if I put an apostrophe in front of it. So there's an old school command called filter that I thought was pretty much unnecessary now with QSelect, but it does have an advantage here. If I use Object Scale, and this again is the purpose of this is to be able to assign annotative scales to non-annotative blocks that have annotative attributes inside the block and be able to pick them as a group. So with QSelect, I can't do that transparently, but I can pick filter transparently. And what I've already done this once, which is why this is in here. Let me just get rid of those so I can start that again. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to delete this. So with filter, what you do is identify what you're trying to filter. And you can, by the way, filter using AutoLisp as well with the ssget function. But this is not an AutoLisp exercise. So if I get on here and say what I want is block names, and then I select the block name of what I want, select shrub 2, pick OK. Now I'm going to add that to my list. Then I'm going to do I'm going to select things. Now when I've got none of this, all I'm doing is filtering for what happens next. So what happens next is I go to apply and it asks me to select objects. I can type all. Every block name shrub 2 gets selected. Enter. I'm still in the object scale command because I issued filter transparently. Now that I've done that, press enter one more time. Now this could be misleading because it looks like all those scales are already assigned to all those. But if you look down here, it says list all scales for selected objects. And then down here, list scales common to all. If I do that, the only scale common to all of them is 1 to 1. So I can go and add my 1 to 100. Pick OK, pick OK. Now all the blocks with that name are identified in here. So I just made a group called shrub2. Maybe I should have, let me undo that. So I went to the group command and I indicated I wanted to make a group. When it asked for selecting objects, I did the same thing I did with filter, apostrophe filter. So I'll come up here, I'm going to then apply that, type all. Now I'll give it a name, and the name's going to be shrub2. So now I have a group named shrub2 that consists of those things, and I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to try it. Object scale, G for group, shrub2, enter, enter. Once again, list, that looks like it is going to work. So I'm going to add 1 to 100. Okay. Okay, yep. So you got a couple ways to do that. This is a little bit frustrating because you'd think you could do it through properties and you can't. That's good for now. What I'm going to do is pause this and we're going to go on to the next drawing assignment. Well, I've unpaused it thinking, why am I pausing? I just want to show you what we're doing here. And by the way, I did look when we were doing this. I went and looked because I couldn't remember what the command was for adding a scale to an object. So I went and looked that up by going to Google. Don't overlook Google as a great place to get information. So, I'm glad I did because I forgot the whole purpose of this is to do an extraction. So what you're going to do when you get all these things done, and I've got it there now, and there's some other things you have to add in addition to the ones I just did, you have to extract all the attribute data from those blocks. And the idea of extracting attribute data is this. You're going to use a command called data extract. Or data extraction, which you can use transparently. You can use at the command line, you can use as a dialog box. So you're going to create two things. You're going to create a data table inside this drawing, and you're also going to create, a spreadsheet on the outside. So it says create a new data extraction. Don't use anything else. Don't use anything existing. Go to yes, okay. And now you're going to save it with a name of some kind. It's going to have a DXE. Put it in your grade folder with that DXE extension. I'll call this Tanny. Or maybe I'll just call it shrub2 in this case because that's the data that I'm going to be extracting. Then I'll pick save. Now it comes and asks you what you want to use. We're going to use the current drawing. We don't add drawings because you can extract data from multiple drawings. We're just going to do it in this one drawing. Now you notice there's all these choices here, which means we can actually extract data from blocks, from things that aren't blocked. You get data about all the arcs in the drawing, all the circles in the drawing. That's not what you want though. What you want is blocks with attributes, which is the most common way to extract data. So I'm going to check this box right here. Now only blocks that are in use with attributes right there, and for some reason Bunya has attributes, but Shrub is the one I want, so I'm just going to say I'm going to extract the data from that. You're going to have multiple blocks to extract that data from. Come over here. What is it you want to extract? Again, we're going to filter. We don't want 3D visualization, drawing, general, geometry, or miscellaneous. We want only attributes. The attributes we want are all of them, which in this case are cost and position. Come back over here. Now you say, what do you want? How do you want this? It's going to look like this. There's one of each of these things at these different locations, and you notice it considers them unique because all the location data is unique on these. Have an account, show a name. We don't want to link external data. That's if we have an external database. We can do a preview if you want. It's going to look like this. Close that out, go on to next. Now we're going to put this as a table in this drawing, and we're going to output it to an external file. And the external file can be a spreadsheet, a comma delimited file, a database, or a text file. So we're going to do it two ways. You're going to do one spreadsheet. It's already set up for spreadsheets right there. Come back out here. Yeah, the table I didn't do, it's done. Now I need Excel to open this up, but if I go to my Documents folder now, and in the Documents folder, nope, that's not the Documents folder, that is. The Documents folder, the thing I just created is right there, Tanny XLS. Open it up. That's a spreadsheet. Now I have a spreadsheet. Once I've got a spreadsheet, I can manipulate that data any way I want. So the second part of this is to create a table that gets inserted into AutoCAD as opposed to an external reference. To do that, you have to start by creating a table style. So I've got table style as the name of a command. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to create a new one because I can't delete standard, and we don't want to ever use standard as a name for anything. So I'll make a new one. I'll just call this Tanny. And now the main things you want to change here in the style are the text font that's used. So under data, you've got three categories: title, headers, and data. So data is the category where most of the information goes. We're going to have that be 0.12 plotted. Now there's no annotative table, so you're going to have to either put this table in layout or you're going to have to scale it up after you insert it. We'll put it in a layout. So that takes care of the data. Then we go over and say under header, I'm going to do the same, Roman S. I want that to be 0.12, and I'll go under title, and for titles we want that to be 1/4 inch, but I also want it to be Roman S. That's all we need for the table style. Now that you've got a table style created, now I'll go back into data extraction, and in data extraction I'll go through the same process we just went through. I'll give this a name. I'll call it Tanny Table because we're going to put a table in the drawing. And again, I'm not going to bring in everything. It's only blocks that have attributes, not all object types. Come over here and get rid of everything except attributes. That's all I'm going to be interested in for this particular table. Pick next. And now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to set the format to currency. Come back out here. Now this time I'm going to insert the table into the drawing. Go next. There's my table that I want to use. Manually set up the table. I think that is all going to work out. Okay, so I'm just going to go next on here. Now, and insert the table. It asks me where I want to put it. We'll just put it over here for now. We zoom right in on this. Now we'll have this whole list right here. And I think that would allow me to add another column that adds those up because they all come in as numbers. And one thing about this table is, if we look at the properties of it, it's quite small. And if you look over here, you're thinking, I probably can make that annotative. But unless something changed in 2012 20, you cannot make a table annotative. And if I go to properties and look, there's no annotative option there as well. The reason for that is because tables normally get put in layouts, although I think they should be something you can make annotative. So I'm just going to cut that out of the model space, go over here to a layout, and in the layout, we'll just dump that. In the layout, when I bring that table in, it's going to come in with the sizes that we identified. The other thing you could do to make a table annotative is to enclose it in a block and make the block annotative. That would take a little bit of effort, but the other possibility is just making a style that's designed for being put in model space. My feeling is make your table as though you want it to plot, put it in a layout, and that's your best bet. All right, let's take insert your data. So you can have a data table in AutoCAD, and I just closed that out, so I don't have that anymore. And you also need an external file, which is an Excel spreadsheet. Now, get rid of that as well. Go back and look at the third of the assignments here. And the third, and this was me attempting to figure out how to put a formula in the AutoCAD table, and I'm going to look into that because it's not working the way I think that it should. Now, okay, that takes care of that one. So go back to the assignments, and the last assignment is an XREF assignment. And in this case, what you're going to do is you're going to save the drawing file that's here called XREF guest. So just go ahead and put it someplace. Again, I'm going to put it in my documents folder. And then the section from AutoCAD on external references is included here, so you can just open it up. And then if we take a look up here, I want you to create an architectural drawing using your own template, externally reference that in, and then go through and do the following things. There's a layer filter, you're going to change line types. And all of this is really designed to make sure you understand how to work with external references. And I think I'll show you the XClip command, and then I want you to do a little research on visRetain, which is described in your book, and then make a PDF file of this. So fundamentally what I want you to do is to start a new AutoCAD drawing. Start it with architectural template of some kind. You may have one already set up. In this case, I have one already set up with the units done correctly, and I've got a dimension style in there. Then externally reference in your drawing file. Make sure it's attached DWG and not something else. Go and find it. And XREF guest is what it was called. Bring it in. Place it someplace. And then what you're going to do is go through and do the kinds of things that they indicated you should do. One of those was to change the fade control. You go to options, and under options and display, you've got a slider over here that takes care of XREF display. Right now it's 50% transparent. Drop that down to 0, and now, actually it can be anything 0 or less. Now when you come out, you see that it's much more easily read. The other command in here that you may not be familiar with is the XClip command. The XClip allows you to clip an external reference, so you're only looking at portions of it. And then there are some controls, an index control and a spatial control and a layer index control that allow you to save that setting. So every time you open this drawing, the host drawing, the XREF comes in clip. So you can clip it a number of different ways. In this case, what I'm going to do is to generate a new boundary or a new polyline. I think I can do this. Well, we'll do a polyline. So I am going to doing this again because there is something that I want to just press enter and type new. So I'm going to make a new clipping. Now you can be a rectangular clip, you can be a polygonal clip. You can also invert the clip, so you could put a rectangle on and get everything that's outside the rectangle, or if you have a polyline set up, you can do that. I'm just going to go with rectangular, and I'll just say what I want to do is to clip this, so the only things visible, say, are that. Now it clips your external reference, so you don't have to worry about the other things, and now you can go ahead and do the other things that are involved with that assignment. I'm going to call this one quits, and